Today's video, we are going to paint some PLA prints because I've never done this before. We're going to start off with priming, giving it that base or foundation coat, doing some ink washing, as well as finally some dry brushing. I have never done this, so how hard can it be? We're just painting plastic, right? We're fine. We're fine. All right, so this is what I'm going to paint. I've actually got 4 different textures here. So I've got here, this is like rock, the rock texture. And I've got here brick. It might be better to see it like that. There you go, brick. This is that metal tread plate. And then this is like a wood grain there. I printed these up using a standard 0.2 layer height. So, but you can definitely see the layer lines there. Even with the surface there of the brick. This one actually doesn't look too bad. This actually looks pretty good. Wood grain, you can still see it's great, but you got some of the layer lines there. And what I did is I made multiple copies of these textures just so I have a chance to compare between the different stages when I'm painting. And also too, just in case I really mess it up, I can just start all over again. It's not a big deal. All right, I'm just gonna clean up the surfaces here a little bit with some sandpaper. I got some 150, which might be a little bit too much, and then some 220 here as well, just to help clean it up a little bit. But that's it. I wanna keep that nice texture there. Just gonna clean this off now with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol just to ensure I don't have too much dust left on these. Right, we're gonna prime. We're gonna prime with this stuff, the Rust-Oleum Painter's Touch Gray Primer. Just to make this a little bit easier to deal with and hold, I've attached these little tabs and I printed them up so then I can just do this and just hold it this way and hopefully not make too much of a mess. Just don't want to put too thick of a layer on there because it's going to start to drip, which I do not want. Okay, here they are. Let's let them dry. Primed and dried and ready to go. Acrylic paint is what I'm going to be using, and you can see here I've got an amazing assortment of colors. These are the only ones I could find, and yes, these are dollar store paints. I've been using these things at school and having students do projects with them, and it never occurred to me that mixing them with a little bit of water will help with the application of these things, because these are pretty thick to begin with, and adding a little bit of water will help thin them out and hopefully make the application a little smoother. And I've been looking at what proportions should I be doing here, and one proportion I found was about 20 to 30% water, I'm assuming by volume, added to the paint should thin it out enough that it will be thick enough that it will give you a decent color, but not give you those streaks when it's applied by a brush. So whatever that means, that's what I'm gonna try. This is my paint palette, again, thanks to the dollar store. And then an assortment of different brushes that I got from the dollar store. One of the things that I'm going to try to do here is do some dry brushing. And I've had, looking online, people were suggesting stuff like these really big brushes, and these are makeup brushes that I got from the dollar store. I have no idea if this is gonna work, but we're gonna try it out. So the primer's done, it's time to get our base or foundation coat. Never having done this before, I've got some definite challenges here, and it's even just with the basics like color. My color palette basically extends to stuff like brown, light brown, dark brown. That's it. I mean, like, it's a very rudimentary understanding of color, and even just trying to mix things together. If I wanted like a brick colored red, how the heck do I get a brick colored red? Or a brown that is like like a chestnut or a walnut brown or a cedar, like what? And this is the other thing too, I don't have a script for this. Like normally I have everything scripted out for my videos. I know what I'm gonna say. I know, generally speaking, what's gonna happen. I have no idea what's gonna happen with this. So I'm doing all this footage. I have no idea what's gonna make it in the final cut. We are going to start off with something basic. I want to start off with rock, move on to the tread plate, wood, and then brick. I mean, the rock, I'm already halfway there. It's gray. Basing it off of stuff I've been listening to and watching on YouTube, It's Mead Made is a fantastic resource. What it means to have a base coat versus a wash, which is something else I want to do, and then moving on to a dry brush. So I want to pick something that's a nice gray, that's not too light, not too dark. My understanding of general colors is just really shining through here. And it's time to add some water. Now, like I said, based on what I've been looking at, 20 to 30% water added by volume to your paint, your acrylic paint. So with some hard math, I'm just totally guessing here. This looks about 20%, quarter teaspoon. I figure whatever I'm gonna do, I need to keep tabs on what I'm doing, or at least keep track, because if I ever need to remix this color again, it needs to be hopefully the same color and the same consistency. So, all right, water time. Let's mix this together, because white and black should make gray. All right, I don't want to brag, but I think that looks pretty amazing. Or maybe it's just the gray I'm settling for. Whatever. Now it's time to paint. And let me grab all of my rock faces here. So what I want to do is I kind of want to show the progression and how each stage looks. So this is my priming stage. So I'm going to set that off to the side. And I'm going to do the next 4 by basically painting them like this. So this, not a lot of difference there, because I'm basically just painting this kind of the same color. But that's why I'm keeping one of those off to the side so I can compare it. Now, in terms of painting technique, I have none. Look at that. I think that's rock. Okay, I'm gonna do that for the other pieces here. And I mean, it's hard to see it here. It doesn't feel like I'm getting too many streaks in there, but the actual texture of the print itself is pretty irregular, so it kind of hides the paint streaks that I've got, if there are any, assuming that I didn't add in enough water. All right. Let's let those dry. We'll wash this off. Let's have a go at our tread plate. And of course, going to involve some silver, but I want to darken this a little bit because I don't want to go with the full silver just yet, because I think I'm going to save that for my dry brush. So I'm going to add some silver, but then I'm going to add a little bit of black to darken it, and maybe hopefully try to knock down just how like shiny it is. I don't know, maybe I need to add some white. So again, I have no idea what I'm doing, so I'm just sort of messing around here a little bit. So this is already starting to look like the gray, but I'm kind of hoping that we still have some of that metallic look to it. How is that looking? Metallic-y? I don't know. Okay, next up, I want to add in a little bit of water. Again, I'm going quarter teaspoon. Paint is still not super watery, but hopefully not going to leave streaks on my model. So yeah, not a lot of painting technique here. I'm just trying to cover the plate. All right, I'm gonna clean this up, and then we'll move on to the wood and then the brick. All right, this is wood. And so I got my brown, cinnamon brown. All right, so this is where lack of color knowledge works against me here. I get the feeling I want to go lighter with this, but is it just a matter of adding in white paint? I don't know. Or do I have to be like yellow paint, but then do I really start to swing the color over too far to a certain tone that I don't want? Like that? I don't know. You know what? This is where I need to have a almost like a model or some sort of example to work from. And darn it, let's add a little bit of yellow. Don't know if that was a good idea. Or was it? Let's see how this goes. All right, that's interesting. So this is obviously the color here is going on, but I need a lot more paint. So the coverage that I'm getting with the acrylic paint is not as much as I thought. You can almost still see the, not almost, you can still see the gray coming off of there, coming up from behind from the primer. So I may have to let this dry and then come at this again for like a second coat. Second coat. That's better. I might wait and actually give this a third coat. One more coat. Oh yeah. So really important that I remembered the proportions of the paint that I was putting in here, because it could really easily become a different shade. All right, next up, brick. This is what I actually mixed together. I didn't show it to you, but it was deep red and just a little bit of just black, just to help darken this up a little bit. And I got this color. Looks like a brick red. All right, the challenge here is going to be this stuff here. The fact that I've got my mortar in between the bricks. I'm kind of hoping I can just skim over top of it and just get the bricks and leave the mortar untouched so that I don't have to go at it with another brush. But we'll find out. Here we go. Oh boy. Oh no, look, it went right through it. If I went like this, oh, that's better. So if I just skim it, I'm not trying to put too much paint on there, like so. Yeah, it kind of worked. I'm definitely still getting some paint in there. I'm gonna go at this again, and let's see if I can do this, and maybe not load it up so much with paint. And going at it this way, because these lines, the bristles will definitely go in there. Although I do run the risk of having them go in there too, but maybe if I go at a steep enough angle, I can prevent that from happening. That's much better. That looks a heck of a lot better. Maybe the best thing to do is go at it diagonally, so that way I don't have any lines that are running in line with the bristle strokes. Yeah, so definitely going at it from an angle, really angling like almost flat, allows the bristles not to go deep into those grooves, the mortar joints. I might give this a second coat. So I'm just gonna let these dry for a little bit, and I'm gonna come back to it and maybe give it a second coat depending on how these look. Let's let them dry and we'll be back. All right, I've just painted on the second coat really lightly, and I didn't bother filming it because I just wanted to get this going. So what's next? All right, next up, we're gonna do an ink wash and see what that does to these samples that we've painted. We've applied our base coat. Okay, so I've got 3 sets left. We're gonna do ink washes next on these 3, and let's see the impact it has on these. And apparently how this works is we need a 40% paint, 60% water mix. So again, I'm just totally eyeballing this, although I should probably measure this out, but so this is what I've got. I just eyeballed it. I'm trying to just mix it up a little bit here. See there, it's pretty watery. For this, I just used the black acrylic paint, and that's it. I'm assuming that depending on what kind of ink wash you're going to want to do, you could change the color of it, but essentially the purpose of the ink wash is really just to settle in the grooves, indentations, and I guess just trying to really accent the texture of the surface that you're painting there by having this ink wash settle in to those little crevices and indentations. Let's see if this works. So I've got these cosmetic pads that I'm going to use to sort of blot dry the surface of this and hopefully leave the ink wash in the crevices and cracks and stuff like that of my textures. That is looking really inky all of a sudden. I don't know. Okay, that might be too much. First attempt, still too much paint to water, I believe. All right, let's add some more and let's try that again. All right, added more water. I've added a lot more water, and I don't know if you can see just how watery this is. It's supposed to have this kind of consistency where it has color to it, but it easily washes off, which I guess is why they call it a wash. I have a feeling, and this is a lot of water. This is certainly not a 60 to 40 water to paint mix. This is, I would say, 10% paint, 90% water. I may have made it too dilute, but whatever. So this is the same one that I had before. I sort of wiped it off, rinsed it off, but it's not, I think I've kind of wrecked it. But I just want to get a sense as to how this is going to go on. And then, yeah, for me to then be able to do that. Looks like I've done nothing whatsoever, but let's try it with the wood. That actually looks pretty darn good. Like it's really sinking into the crevices there. Let me just see if I can get this into the light. I don't know how much more I want to wipe off here. But still, you can still easily see it compared to what we had there. Here comes the tread plate. And same thing, it's just, yeah. Again, if I'm just gonna compare it with this, this is a little bit more subtle. I can tell there's like, it looks like this is dirty. The one with the wash. Maybe that's the whole point of it. Again, just sinking into those crevices adds a little bit more depth to the model surface, or the texture surface. All right, rock. Make sure that it gets in those grooves and nooks and crannies. So it is a bit of a messy process because you are gonna get like something that has an awful lot of paint on there, but then again, once you dry it off, ooh, that looks kind of awesome. We'll let those dry, but then I'm gonna do that for the other three again, just to give me a chance to practice. And let's see how this goes. Gotta make sure it gets into these mortar joints here, because that's where the indentations are. And then once they're in there, then I'll just wipe it off. That's better. Wipe off the excess. Compare it with the untouched one. Again, it's kind of hard to tell, but it does, yeah, it kind of makes it look like a little worn as opposed to this, which is a completely clean looking surface. Really trying to make sure I'm getting all of this watery paint into those grooves. It works a little bit on the tread plate. It's not as dramatic in terms of the impact that it's having here, but it's probably because it's just not a lot of texture to it. There is some bumps obviously on the surface of it, but not a lot of deep grooves or anything like that. Again, perhaps one of my favorite applications for this ink wash is on this rock surface. It just makes it pop. Look at that. Here they are, ink washed. Let these dry. Let's see what they look like. And then after that, we're gonna hit it with some dry brushing, find out how that works. And next, what we are going to try to do is dry brushing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set one of these samples aside just to be able to compare it later. So I've got 2 sets left. So not too bad. I'm glad I actually have multiple sets because just with the mistakes and trying to button down some sort of technique here, because I've never done this before, so it just gives me a chance to take several cracks at it. So the dry brush is interesting because if we contrast it back to the ink wash was all about using like a watered down black is what I used to basically fill in or seep into the cracks and crevices of these different textures. Now with dry brush, it's all about trying to accentuate the raised parts of these different textures. A lot of it is just essentially kind of like a lighter version of the base coat, generally speaking. But it depends on the look that you're looking for and the context of the texture, for lack of a better explanation. Like for example, I could just go with a simple lighter gray with this, and I think I might do that. This is a metal plate, so I might actually go with a lighter silver color just to sort of accentuate. The wood, I might just go with a lighter brown on this. For the brick, I've seen different schools of thought on this. Some people were talking about maybe using like a lighter gray. Others would say it was like a lighter color of brick. I think I might go with a lighter color brick just to, again, illustrate that if this was an old brick, over time, these pieces that are jutting out might get chipped away. And whenever you've seen brick get chipped away, you're sort of revealing sort of new brick or lighter colored brick. So I'm gonna try to emulate that on this and see what that looks like. All right, so let's start off with the rock surface first. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create kind of like a lighter gray, a little bit of black, and a lot more of the white. The other interesting thing when it comes to this type of paint application is that we've been mixing in water, different amounts of water, whether it was for the base coat or even more water if we're talking about our ink wash. But for this, for dry brushing, apparently you want a thicker paint. And I guess it makes sense because you want to apply this very gradually and with a brush that is essentially kind of dry. Like it has paint on it, but the paint has been allowed to dry out quite a bit. And as a result of that, that's how you get your dry brush. And the brush that we're going to use for this, I've seen people use something like a brush that is similar to, or I guess people have used like a makeup brush. When it comes to this, they always say to take like a paper towel and you're going to dip it in here and then you're just going to paint the towel. See how that's like leaving something like that? I think that's what we're aiming for here, but it seems like an awful waste of paint, but that's the technique. All right, so let's see. Oh, I see. Yeah. So just by brushing this on here, it's very faint, and I don't know if I'm adding enough, but essentially what I'm doing is I'm just adding in just the smallest amount compared to something like that, although this is hard to see because of the lighting. Okay, that's my first attempt. Let's try this again with the second one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to load this brush up a little bit more, dry it off, but see if I can maybe not have so much of it taken off just yet. So let's see if this makes a difference. And oh yeah, so I think this might be a little bit too much now. I'm just lightly brushing it across the surface there. This might be too much, especially like right there. I feel like I've over applied that, and I think it's because I had too much paint on my brush. But we'll let it dry, see what happens. Next, what we're gonna try is the tread plate, but we're gonna go with a different color here because I don't wanna go gray here. I'm gonna try this out with, it's called Silver Morning Paint. So I'm just going to, again, do the same thing. I wanna get this more or less dry. All right, let's see. First crack, here we go. That looks really cool. I'm catching it in the light right now, but boy, does that ever bring a little bit more depth to it where the raised parts, the bumpy parts are looking like they're metallic, and then this darker background of the plate itself, it just sort of pops out. That looks really good. I like that. And I wonder too how much of it has to do with the brush I'm using, because this brush is a wider brush. I feel like it is just getting that detail on there. I like that. All right, so there it is. That's the two plates, metal plates there. Next, what am I gonna do for this? So I used the brown paint. This was called Cinnamon Brown. And I wanna make this lighter, and I'm trying to remember the original mixture ratios that I had for my paint. So I guess something for me to consider next time is I have to, I should probably document how I'm mixing these paints together and the relative amount of the different colors that I'm using for these paints, so that when it comes time to these different stages, I don't run the risk of having paints that either don't match or colors that are too close together. I'm trying to create a lighter brown here, but I'm not sure if this actually works for this particular application if we're talking about wood. But I guess for me right now, I just want to get a lighter brown. Let's see, I'm running out of brushes here. So here's just another brush. Same thing, I'm just going to, okay, I just got to make this lighter. All right, let's try this. I'm hoping this is light enough that it'll show up here. And I'm going to gently sort of apply it across the grain like this. I can see what the paint's doing. It is highlighting these raised edges of my texture, and it's making it pop without a doubt. I just don't know if I've got the right color on this. It's not bad. Let those dry. Clean one of these off and then come back and then do the final application for my dry brushing on the brick panel. All right, here comes the brick panel. This is probably the worst of my samples. So I'm gonna start with this one because this is almost like my test run here. And I'm just going to add in the red paint called Deep Red. And I'm not going to add anything to this. I'm just going to see what this looks like on the paper towel here first, if I get this brush going here. Let's get most of this off. Yeah, this is the worst one here. So let's just do this. I'm going to, like I did before when I was painting just the surface of the bricks with my base coat, I'm going to go at this so that the bristles hopefully don't go in between there and get into my mortar joints. I don't see really any big difference. Maybe a little bit. I wonder if I need to go with a lighter. Do I go with something like yellow in there so I don't lose all my red? Okay, that's red with a little bit of yellow. I don't mind the look of that. Let's load up this brush. Let's see what we get. Okay, so this is my first crack here. Let's Oh, okay. I like that. Let's do this again. Let's apply it onto this brick here. And let's see what we get if I just gently. And I'm trying to make sure that when it comes across the face of this brick, I'm starting this stroke from outside the panel here so that I'm not jutting it in there and then moving it so then it ends up getting onto the mortar joints. That's my technique. I have no idea if that is any good to anybody, but we're gonna let these dry and then we're gonna come back and take a look at these textures and almost do a bit of a comparison between the different stages that I did when it came to this whole painting process, and maybe hopefully be able to appreciate some of the differences that we're seeing here. All right, let these dry. I'll see you in a bit with the magic of video now. All right, here is the final reveal. Let's take a look at our rock surface. So this was the primed rock, and in fact, I should have kept one just without any paint on it whatsoever. I printed all of these textures just using PLA black filament, and this was the primed rock surface. And then we went ahead and we added the base coat, which was a very similar looking gray, but you can definitely see that there is a difference. This is certainly lighter in color than our primer. Next, after we added our base coat or primary coat, then we put in our ink wash. Now this is really interesting because you can see that this does look slightly darker, but it also accentuates, especially around the edges here and in the crevices of the rock face, you get that slightly darker tinge or slightly darker tone in that detail there. So definitely add some depth to it. And then this was the one with the dry brush using a slightly lighter gray. I'm not too stoked about this. I do think I overloaded my brush because I've got these really sort of heavy spots there of light gray, and it really should have been much more subtle than that. But what I do find interesting is that there's certainly a difference as you move across here, starting from the primer, base coat, ink wash, and then our dry brush on top. That this is a big difference from that. But yeah, there it is. That's the rock surface. Let's take a look at the metal tread plate. All right, again, printed originally on black PLA, but this was our primed metal tread plate there. Then we did our base coat, slightly lighter. Probably didn't add enough paint onto this, but whatever, it works. Then our ink wash, and I didn't give this a lot of attention, but now that it's dried, I am noticing, especially in those raised little sort of parts there, it is slightly indented on the inside, and the ink wash definitely sort of soaked in there, and you get kind of like this sort of grimy, used look to it. That's very cool. I like that. Very nice. And then finally the dry brush, which I just did a simple silver, and there it is there. Now, I don't know if the camera's catching this, but this looks awesome. I'm very happy with this. This does look like, you know, you have this grimy metal, but because of the wear on this tread plate, it constantly shines up or buffs out the raised parts, which releases that silver, and that's kind of what this paint job is trying to emulate. Well, it looks good. Again, for a first shot at this, I'm pretty happy with the results. I was not sure what I'd be getting. The fact that I get something that kind of looks like it's realistic in some way is very, very exciting to me. So a pretty big difference between the primed versus the finished product there. All right, so here is our primed wood paneling. Yeah, there it is. And then we applied on our base coat. This took a lot of coats. This took about 4 coats. And even then, looking at it, you can see that there's still some of that base primer coming through in the color. So I probably could have done a better job with this. But Yeah, this took a lot of coats. And then our ink wash. Now this, again, looks darker, and you can see that the wood grain is really popping out now because of that ink wash settling into these little grooves in this texture. Looks really good, actually. I'm happy with it. The one that kind of confused me was the dry brush, and we tried to go with a lighter brown. I don't know if I went light enough. I can barely tell the difference between this and this, with where it's just the ink wash versus the ink wash and my dry brush on there. I probably should have gone with a lighter shade, but again, I think that's going to be something that comes with practice. But overall, I mean, it does look different. It looks kind of like wood. So, next up, brick. So our primed brick wall texture, there it is there. And then our base coat. Now for the base coat, I just did a really gently applied surface of this darkened red that I had to mix together, and applied in a way that I would try to keep these mortar joints, prevent them from actually getting painted but with the red paint. So then I would just be left with the gray there and not have to worry about trying to color in those mortar joints. This was probably one of my better samples that I came up with. So I was happy with this. This was actually, it looked good. It looked like a brick wall right off the hop. So I wasn't sure what to expect when the ink wash came about. And so this is the ink wash here. And it just, especially with these mortar joints, it just darkened them up a little bit. And even a little bit on the surface of the brick. It turned this really generic looking brick wall into something that looked a little bit more weathered, a little bit more, yeah, like used. It's seeing them side by side like this, at least for me, I don't know if it's showing up on camera. This one looks a lot more realistic than this. This looks very almost like cartoony. This looks like there's a story here. It's got some weathering on it. And then next was the dry brush, and I went with a slightly lighter red, and it's good. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm having a hard time trying to tell the difference, except these little bit of lighter highlights contrasted with the dark sort of blotches on the surface of the brick. It does add to the realism of it. I just have to look really closely at it in order to see it. So I wonder if this is something that with more practice, there'd be a better technique that I would be able to generate something that looked more realistic, or at least something I'd be able to see the difference between these two. Just a final comparison there. I mean, that looks pretty darn cool. Not too bad for a first try. I'm actually pretty happy with the results of this. This is a very doable type of activity here, and if this is something that you might want to take on as a bit of a hobby, creating miniatures or dioramas or whatever you're wanting to do, you can do it, and you can do it using like cheap dollar store paints. All right, it is actually a lot of fun, and I've really enjoyed doing this. And I know that this is something that I will use hopefully for a project coming up soon. My little video journal on learning how to paint PLA. Till next time, take care.